The smell came back, and with it the names that never left me. For decades they called me strong, but no one wanted to hear what my hands had done. Now that my voice shakes, maybe it's the last chance to speak. My name is Eleanor Ruth Maddox. I'm 90 years old and I live alone in a small room at a nursing home in Athens, Ohio, where even the sound of the kettle seems to whisper that time passed too fast. They used to call me an exemplary nurse. Now they just call me Miss Ellie. But what no one knows is that I've kept, for 60 years, a notebook hidden under a blue blanket. A triage journal I wrote during the war, filled with names, voices, and requests that were never meant to be silenced. I carry the weight of a swapped stamp of a lie I saved in secret, and of dozens of promises I wrote for others but never kept for myself. I was trained to heal, but no one ever taught me what to do with what doesn't heal. Sit with me, darling. Take a deep breath. No need to rush. This story isn't easy to tell, but it's lived inside me for so long. It now needs to find someone who'll listen with an open heart. If my whisper reaches you, if it touches you in any way, subscribe to the channel, leave me a kind word, and if you can, share this with someone who also carries memories they've never said out loud. Maybe we're not as alone as we thought. Today the hospital felt colder than usual. Maybe it was the too white hallway or the heavy dry air outside. I sat in the beige waiting room chair, the kind that looks soft until you sit, and folded my hands over my lap. I was waiting for a routine exam, the kind they order more because of your age than any urgency. I didn't expect to feel anything. Not anymore. But then the smell came. Funny how some smells don't knock. Ether doesn't ease in. It slices, like a sharp scalpel or a muffled scream under a canvas tent. That dry, surgical scent, too clean to be real, cut through me like a memory that refuses to die. And in that moment, just that one, I wasn't there anymore. My heart jumped, small and tired but familiar. My fingers, shaky, moved on their own. I opened my old purse, more habit than style, and started rummaging through it like searching for gauze in chaos. And there it was, the notebook, covered in leather darkened by time, with a strip of blue cloth tucked between the pages like a scar. I pulled it out slowly, with hands that no longer rush but still know the weight of things that shouldn't be read. There, between the folds of silence and dust, rested my triage journal. A journal that was never meant to be one. It was a record, a confession, a portable grave. I swore I'd never open it again. But today, the smell of ether gave me no choice. I held the notebook in my lap like cradling a baby that never made it. For a moment I hesitated. The names, the dates, the scribbles, the red and blue codes. They all seemed to whisper back, like the voices buried in that cover were breathing again. I felt sweat down my spine, despite the cold air. My legs grew heavy, like in the war days, when every step between stretches meant walking a line between life and statistics. I flipped through the first pages with care. My eyes landed on a familiar name, or maybe the name found me. Written in my slanted handwriting, Private Lewis M. Carter, 18 years old, abdominal hemorrhage, low priority. Beside it, a note not in the protocol. Asked to write to his mother. I called him son by accident. I closed my eyes. I felt the sticky heat of Tent 5 again, the damp cloth on my neck, the sound of the helicopter fading like abandonment, and his voice. I don't want to die waiting, ma'am. Let me pretend I still got a chance. His voice is still here, and his request even louder. I took a deep breath, looked back at the journal. The pages were yellowed, some stained in corners by drops I can't tell anymore. Tears, blood, or just the sweat of long nights. There were small symbols only I'd understand today. 1 asterisk meant asked to be heard. 2, smiled before fading. 3 was never good. 3 meant died alone. My fingers paused on one of those marks, and I wanted to erase it. But time doesn't go back. It only echoes. I stayed there, journal resting on my legs like carrying forgotten heroes no one ever honored. Those who died without statues, ceremonies, medals. Just with my name as the last human contact on their chart. In front of me, a younger woman coughed. She came out of her exam room scrolling her phone, unbothered. She didn't see. No one sees. I exist between folded pages, and still they call me Mrs. Maddox, as if all that's left of me is a last name and medical chart. But inside me lives an entire field hospital, tents, cots, and wounds that never closed. I run my fingers down the journal spine like smoothing a rushed sheet. I remember my tent. The nurse's story no one ever wanted to hear. How we'd stitch secret pockets into clothes to hide small photos, forbidden notes, or medals that weren't ours. Once I found a medal inside a soaked boot. I never knew whose it was. I kept it anyway. "Eleanor!" the young nurse called, opening the door with my name. I looked at her. She wasn't to blame, but she didn't have the eyes to see me either. "Can I have a minute?" I asked softly. She nodded and stepped back inside. I clutched the journal to my chest, not to hide it, but to hold a life. Right then, I realized it wasn't the smell of ether that made me tremble. It was the fact that it still got to me, that my body still remembers what my soul tried to forget, what I tried to silence with years of obedience, with this tired smile I give every time someone calls me strong. Strong. They call it resilience. But resilience, it's just the polite name for silent survival. I sat there a little longer, eyes locked on the open page, where I had once written, "Today I let a man die in silence." And I smiled, handing in the chart. Because I had to look alive, I closed the journal gently, like covering a body. Put it back in my bag. Not at the bottom this time. Today it rides with me in my arms, like the relic it is. I stood up slowly. My body's old, yes, but my memory still beats. And as I crossed the hallway to take my exam, I felt something different. A soft sound, barely there, like distant helicopter blades. Like the bass still lived inside my chest, like triage never really ended, like the coat was still waiting for me at the door. They call me Eleanor Maddox, 90 years old. But before that, I was trembling hands, sleepless eyes, ears with no choice. I was the woman who wrote what no one else could know. And now that everything's come back, I know I won't be able to stop. Today I started reading again, and tomorrow? No. There won't be a tomorrow. Everything will happen today, and soon, very soon, you'll understand why the white coat was never just a uniform. I'm not sure exactly when it started, but I remember clearly the first day I put on the white coat. It was too thin for the morning chill, and too big for the shoulders carrying it. But when I looked at myself in the stained canvas mirror at the triage base, I saw something I didn't expect. Protection. Not from bullets or shrapnel. We were never promised that. It was a different kind of armor. The coat hid me, locked me into a role. Clear, clean, clinical. Inside it, I didn't have to be Eleanor. I didn't have to feel fear. I just had to follow orders, mark priorities, control chaos with colored tags. And I did. For weeks, maybe months. It's hard to count time when days look too much like the nightmares at night. The sound of helicopters always came before the screams. We knew what was coming just by the vibration in the ground, like the earth itself warning. Another drop-off, another wave of boys with shattered eyes and arms dangling like unanswered questions. I stood at the entrance of Tent 5, stamp in hand. Green, yellow, red. Sometimes, none. Sometimes, only silence. The coat, always white. White like the lie we all told ourselves just to keep breathing. It won't hurt. You're going somewhere safe. Your mom's gonna know you were brave. Brave. None of them wanted that. They just wanted to go home, or to stop feeling, or simply to be seen as more than a number among the wounded. I remember one of them especially. I don't remember his name, but I remember his eyes, blue like the scarf he clutched, stained with dirt and blood. He said, "Can you pretend I'm a priority? Just for a minute?" I wanted to say yes. God, I wanted to. But my fingers betrayed my heart. I stamped the chart in silence, without looking at him. The paper slipped from my hand like it weighed lead. That night I wrote, "Today my coat was a wall, and I hid behind it." The journal was with me by then. It wasn't a journal yet, just an extra triage notebook I hid between mattresses. I started with names, then doodles, then phrases. Until one night I wrote a scream. Just that. "I can't take it." I erased it right after, with my thumb wet from spit, like trying to deny what the heart had already whispered. During wartime, that coat became my skin. I slept in it, ate in it, wiped blood, vomit, broken promises, and sometimes tears that weren't even mine. It had an inner pocket where I kept a photograph, a photo I tore in two, a love that never got a name. The stitching started to come, undone in the 3rd month. Still, I refused to trade it for another. It was the only thing that still recognized me, the only one that knew my failures, my silences, my small rebellions. I put it on like slipping into a role, and underneath I hid my guilt too. Because yes, I was the one who stamped, not the generals, not the doctors with their polished pins under dim tent lights. It was me. I was the one who decided, in seconds, if a boy had a shot, if he'd see the sky one more time, if he'd get a chance to write a letter no one would read. And I didn't always get it right. There was a day the line was too long. They were coming in from a bombed-out village. All of them were critical. I moved quickly, efficient, just like I was trained. But I swapped 2 names, 2 stamps. One got on the chopper. The other died at my feet. His chart fell off of the stretcher, and I picked it up too late. I wrote in the journal, "Today the coat weighed more than a coffin." I never told anyone. I kept smiling, stayed firm. They said I was exemplary, that I had a clinical eye. But my eye saw too much. And my memory hasn't slept peacefully since. The triage base wasn't just a place, it was a courtroom. And I, in my white cotton coat, was both jury and executioner. One night I dreamed someone was calling me from the line. They didn't yell, they whispered. "Miss Maddox, I was the one who forgave you." I woke up with the coat covering my face like a veil. I cried silently. The other nurse was 2 meters away, and I couldn't wake her, because between women at war, crying was more intimate than the body. I wrote about it. Kept that note folded inside the coat sleeve. Only pulled it out when the war ended. And even then, I never threw it away. It's still with me today. At the back of the closet, inside a linen bag, rests my old coat, yellowed, stained beyond what soap could clean, with a torn left pocket, a missing button. Sometimes I lay it on my lap and smooth it with my hands, like comforting an old friend who's gone mute. It doesn't speak, but it remembers. The choices, the absences, the seconds that cost lives. Some say time heals. It doesn't. It just changes the smell of the blood, the weight of the memory, the tone of the silence. Now, all these years later, I understand. The coat never protected me from the world. It protected me from myself, because if I took it off, I'd have to feel everything again. I'd have to look into the eyes of what I left behind. But today, with the journal open again, and the memory pounding in my chest, I know I can't hide anymore, because tomorrow, no, today, I will write the name I never wrote. The one of the boy with the blue scarf. The one who called me ma'am, like I was his last chance to make something right. But first, I need to tell you about a night when I broke every rule, a night I lied for someone no one would ever remember. And maybe that's what saved me. Today, as I ran my fingers along the seams of the journal, I realized I don't need words to remember. The names may have faded over time, but the faces are still here. Inside me, in the quietest part of my body, where memory doesn't obey logic or forgetfulness. Some come back at night, in between breaths. Others appear in the reflection of the window, when the late afternoon sun brushes the glass gently, like memories asking for permission to come in. There's one that never left me. He had freckles on his nose and a shallow cut on his forehead. When they laid him on the stretcher, he whispered, barely audible, "I'm okay, but if you can leave me for last, they're worse." I looked around. He was right, and still my hand hesitated. I stamped him as medium priority. He didn't complain. He smiled, a small smile, like someone grateful just to be seen. 2 hours later, he wasn't breathing anymore. I sketched his face on the last page of the journal. It didn't come out right. I was never good at drawing. But I did it anyway. That page is still there. Stained with sweat, with the faint outline of a nose I never forgot. Sometimes I wonder why it was him, among so many. Why that face stayed. Maybe because of the gesture, the kindness. Or maybe because he saw me, looked at me like he knew I needed saving too. Other faces come without names, without sound. A boy with wide, panicked eyes, begging with a mouth that couldn't speak. A Vietnamese woman holding a baby wrapped in a stained sheet. She didn't speak English, but her eyes said everything. I still remember the exact position of her hands, one over the child's chest, the other reaching out to me, as if saying, "Pick him." I didn't. I couldn't. There were rules, protocols, stats that seemed more important than pain. Sometimes I marked as best I could. Other times I just cried later. I wrote in the journal once, "Most people think the trauma comes from what we saw, but what haunts me is what I didn't do." The worst memories aren't screams or blood or explosions. They're lines, the muffled sobs behind canvas, the eyes that asked without speaking, "Is it my turn?" And me, who often answered with a single hand gesture, one that meant everything. One night, a boy grabbed my arm. "Please," he said, "just let me see the sky one more time. I was born nearby. Just take me outside. I wasn't supposed to." And still, I did. 10 steps outside the tent. He looked up and said, "That's it. Thank you." He died 30 minutes later. Now I stare at the ceiling in my room and try to picture the sky he saw. I try to imagine, if it mattered, if my small acts, outside the rules, off the record, made any difference, or if it was all just delay. A kindness that didn't save, but didn't kill either. There are faces that return in the quiet. While I brush my hair, while I set the kettle on the stove, while I arrange the pills on the tray, one shows up often. A young black boy with a cross necklace and a note pinned to his shirt. "If I don't wake up, give this to my sister." I still have that note. It's tucked inside the journal. I never delivered it, and I don't even know if his sister survived. But the note is still there, yellowed, folded, waiting for a hand that never came. "It's not the paper that's heavy," I wrote one day. "It's the promise it carries." Sometimes I wonder if they'd forgive me, if they'd see me as a traitor or just another cog in the war machine. Because we, women at war, didn't carry weapons. But we decided fates with silence and stamps. And that kind of power comes with a guilt that doesn't fade. Now, when I look in the mirror, I see traces of the faces I once knew. A wrinkle near my eye that reminds me of a shy smile. A spot on my hand that showed up right where a boy once grabbed me, leaving his blood. My eyes, so deep now, still hold all the eyes that once looked at me asking for something. A name, a sign, a goodbye. They never called me a hero. And maybe that's for the best, because the real forgotten heroes were them. The ones who died waiting. The ones without names. The ones without headstones, but who still live inside me. Today I'll leave the journal open on the bed, Any page. Maybe the one with the badly drawn face, or the one with the note I never delivered. Just to remind myself that they existed, that I existed with them. And tomorrow? No. Later today. I'll tell you about the one night I disobeyed, and didn't regret it. I don't like telling this part, but every time my fingers brush over the scar on my wrist, almost invisible now, hidden among veins that barely show, I remember that night was real, and that it was then I stopped being just a nurse, or just a triage worker. That night I became something I never managed to name. It was rainy season. In Vietnam, that meant a sky as gray as a wet rag and mud up to your ankles. The helicopters were delayed. They couldn't fly safely in that thick fog. So the wounded piled up, some screaming, others just groaning. And some, the ones that hurt the most, stared at the tent ceiling without making a sound. Like they'd already crossed to another place, and only their bodies were left behind, waiting to be released. That's when he arrived. He must have been 18. Fair skin, eyelashes too long for such a broken face. He was bleeding slowly from a deep cut on the left side of his abdomen. The blood formed a quiet, almost respectful puddle beneath the stretcher. He looked at me with a kind of calm you can't explain. Didn't say much, just lifted his face slightly and whispered, "Will you stay with me till I fade out?" His chart was already stamped. Low priority. That's what they told me over the radio. Don't waste resources. That meant time, and care, and compassion. But that night was different. Maybe it was the rain, or the steady drip of water hitting the canvas, reminding me of the house I grew up in. Or maybe it was just him, that boy with a man's voice and end-of-the-road eyes. I didn't want to watch him die like that, forgotten, ignored, scratched off a list like some clerical error. So I lied. I grabbed a blank chart, wrote a fake number, faked the color stamp, made up a name, and pushed his file forward like slipping a secret into a locked drawer. No one saw, no one questioned it. The rush was so intense, the chaos so loud, that my lie became a miracle. He was taken to the mobile surgery unit 30 minutes later. I never found out if he made it. There was no way to track him. Not with a fake name. Not with a forged chart. But that night, I went to sleep without crying. For the first time in months, my hands didn't feel heavy. I wrote in the journal, "Tonight I saved someone I wasn't supposed to, and I saved myself too." Next to it, I drew a tiny cross with a crooked line through it. Only I would ever know what it meant. The nurse who shared my tent, Mildred, woke me up hours later. She said I had smiled in my sleep, said it was strange, because according to her, I only ever slept when my body completely shut down, and never peacefully. She didn't know about the lie, didn't find out for decades, not even when we came back to the US, not even when we met again years later at a veterans reunion. I kept it to myself, like a little piece of gold tucked into the fold of a scarf. That night taught me something no military order ever would. Sometimes the right thing is to disobey, because blind obedience can be more lethal than any open wound. Sometimes being just means breaking rules, quietly. I wrote a few days later. That phrase is still etched in my mind, like an echo that doesn't fade. Sometimes I wonder if he, the boy with the wounded belly, if he's still alive, if he got married, if he had kids, if he ever told the story of a nurse who once lied for him, or if he never knew. Maybe he woke up with no memory. Maybe he died anyway. But in that moment, as they wheeled him to the surgery tent, he looked back at me, just once, with a look that said, "You saw me." And that was it. That's all they wanted, to be seen, not as numbers or charts or priorities, but as someone's son, someone's brother, as scared people, as real humans. Even now, the sound of rain brings me back to that night. Here in the nursing home where I live, the windows are big. When it rains, I sit in front of them with the journal on my lap. Sometimes I write his name, or rather, the name I made up, and I imagine he's somewhere too, sitting by a window, maybe remembering me without even knowing I was real. And if he never knows, that's okay, because I know, and that's enough for me. In the pocket of my blue coat, I carry a small stone. I picked it up from the ground, right beside his stretcher. It's smooth, rounded. A useless symbol, maybe. But for me, it's proof I did something. That I broke a rule for something that looked like justice. And today more than ever, I know that was my little revolution. And it was only the first, because after that, I started writing. Really writing. Not just charts, not just diagnoses, but confessions. And just like that, the journal became a mirror. I still remember the night my hand trembled as I wrote. Not from the cold, not from pain, but from something deeper, something quieter. For the first time, I wasn't just recording the wounded. I was writing myself, seeing myself on paper, sketching myself like a bleeding mirror. Until then, the notebook was just a tool, an extension of my work at the base, a place where I wrote down cases that didn't fit the forms, impossible requests, phrases no one dared say out loud. But that night, thick with heat, starless, metal in the air, something shifted. I wrote my name, just that, at the top of a blank page, Eleanor Ruth Maddox. And suddenly, I was there. Not as a nurse, not as a cog in triage, but as a woman, as someone who no longer knew where protocol ended and despair began. The words came on their own, as if they'd been waiting weeks for a crack to slip through. Today I lied for a boy who wanted to see the sky, and when he smiled I felt ashamed, because maybe I've never looked at the sky with that much courage. I read the line out loud, softly, scared of what it revealed, of what it showed about me. I closed the journal quickly, like hiding something forbidden, and for the first time I was afraid someone might find it, because inside that notebook, something the war could never allow had begun to form: humanity. I wrote in the dark, with a yellow flashlight and paper damp from my sweaty hands. The letters slanted, crooked, like the notebook was scared too. I started drawing faces, then eyes, then hands. Each detail helped me keep alive the memory of what was real, of what was human, of what was being erased by orders and rotor blades. I remember once a doctor saw the journal open. I had left it under a stretcher, tucked between clean bandages. He looked at me with furrowed brows. He said, "You should burn that. If someone reads it, it could be dangerous." I nodded, pretended to agree. But that same night I wrote at the top of the page, "It's not dangerous to write. What's dangerous is forgetting." After that, the journal stopped being just mine. It became theirs too. Every soldier who asked me to remember a name, every Vietnamese woman who looked at me with fear and hope, every child who was never registered. I started using symbols so no one else could understand. A triangle meant last word. A circle smiled at the end. A rectangle didn't know he was dying. The pages filled with secret codes. I was creating my own language of pain. A language only those who lived wartime could ever decode. And somehow, that healed me, or at least kept me breathing. One night, I wrote something I never read again. It's still there, halfway through the journal. Big letters like shouting at myself. If I stop writing, I turn to stone. If I keep going, I become a witness. And witnesses, they make people uncomfortable. Today, as I flip through the journal, my hands feel colder. Not from the weather, but because what's in there doesn't age. The blood dried. The names vanished from records. But what I wrote still beats, still calls to me, still accuses me, and sometimes still comforts me. I'm no saint, never was. But I was never a machine either. The coat hid that. The smile disguised it. But the journal knew everything. I kept it for years, folded among civilian clothes. I moved across 3 states after the war, changed cities, jobs, lives. But the journal always came with me, like a scar no one sees, but burns when it rains. Sometimes I wonder, what if someone finds it after I'm gone? What if they open it and read the confessions of a woman who stamped fates and cried for them at night? Will they judge me? Will they say I was weak? That I couldn't handle it? Or maybe, just maybe, someone will understand. Someone will read it and feel like they were there too. Even if they never wore a coat, even if they never answered a radio call. Someone who also silenced their grief, who also hid behind paper. Now, at 90, I understand this journal doesn't belong to me. It belongs to everyone who didn't have time to write their own name. And that's why I can't stop now. Because after the journal came the mistake I never told. The wrong stamp, the swapped name, and a boy who died waiting. There are mistakes we make with our hands, and others born in the space between a blink and a heartbeat. What I did that morning wasn't out of malice or carelessness, but it wasn't an accident either. It was haste. It was panic. It was the kind of exhaustion the body doesn't scream, but the soul leaks out. The base was falling apart. It was summer. The heat melted even the metal on our tools. Blood ran faster than the IV dripped, and the radio wouldn't stop calling names. No one could understand. Names cut off, distorted, as if the war itself had forgotten how to pronounce humanity. He was alone in triage. Mildred had been transferred to the evac station. It was just me, a clipboard, a box of stamps, and a line that never seemed to end. That's when the 2 boys came in, almost at the same time. One had his face wrapped in bandages, the other, a deep wet wound in his back. They were conscious, scared, but alive. The first chart arrived. Thompson Alex, 22 years old, priority, red. I looked into his eyes. Brown, steady, alarmingly calm. The second came right after. Reynolds, David, 19 years old. Priority, yellow. And that's when everything fell apart. The field doctor shouted my name. A boy at the end of the line started convulsing. An alarm went off near tent 6, and without realizing it, I switched the stamps. Red on Reynolds, yellow on Thompson. A mix-up, a gesture, a mistake. Reynolds was sent straight to the helicopter. Thompson waited. He waited 23 minutes, and then he stopped breathing. When I realized what I had done, my fingers froze over the journal. I couldn't write. Not even a word. Not a symbol. I just stared at the body under the gray sheet and thought. That was my hand. My hand did this. Hours later, alone, I opened the notebook and wrote, "Today, my hands killed without meaning to." I went over the stamps, the records, the orders, everything. I searched for an excuse, a distraction, a bad signal on the radio. Anything. But the truth was simpler and crueler. I failed. And no one noticed. No one blamed me. No one pulled me aside. The body was catalogued. The chart filed. The life closed. Only I kept the guilt. It wasn't on a report. It was in the seams of my coat, which by then felt like it was made of lead. I didn't sleep that night, or the ones after. Thompson's face came back every time I shut my eyes. That calm look, like he trusted me to know what to do. And I broke that trust with one wrong stamp. His chart is still in the journal. I folded a blank page over it, but I could never tear it out. It's still there, with the smudged stamp, a torn corner, and a note I wrote days later. I lost one, and no one knew. But I knew, and I'll never forget. Since then, I never trusted my speed again. Never stamped without looking into their eyes. Never fully forgave myself. Today, at 90, I still wake up some mornings with my chest tight. I open the journal and read his name. Not to punish myself, but to remember, because forgetting would be like making the same mistake all over again. I've thought about writing a letter to his family. I don't know where they are. Maybe they're gone. Maybe they never knew that their son's name was stamped wrong by an exhausted woman on a day when the world felt like it was collapsing. But what if they're still out there? What if that letter is their only shot at justice? Even if it's too late. Maybe I'll write it. Or maybe I'll just leave that page open for someone to read when I'm no longer here. Today, as I smooth the journal in my lap like soothing a wounded animal, I realize that some pages weigh more than others. And this one bends my shoulders. Because there's a difference between losing a soldier and being the one who lost him. And I was that woman. Still am. But now, I need to tell you what it was like to come home. To come back without really coming back. Because sometimes, surviving the war is easier than surviving the silence it leaves behind. The plane landed on a gray strip somewhere in a state I barely recognized. People clapped, some cried. I kept my hands folded in my lap, clutching the journal like a child that was never born. No one said, "Welcome home." No one asked what we had lost. They just told us to move forward step by step, as if we were still marching, Coming back felt like jumping off a moving train. The body arrives, but the rest takes longer, or never arrives at all. My mother was waiting outside the airport, wearing an old wool coat and eyes that wanted to ask, but were afraid of the answer. "You okay, sweetheart?" she said. I smiled, said I was fine. It was the first of many smiles I'd used like bandages. Smiles that didn't heal, only hid the hole. The next day, they called me a retired nurse. I found it strange. I wasn't even 40. But to everyone else, my cycle was done. Like I'd come back whole. Like the war had just been a brief pause in civilian life. I didn't correct them. I just smiled. That same night, I packed the coat into a suitcase and shoved the suitcase to the back of the closet. I never fully unpacked. I never could. I began living in a house with closed windows. People visited, brought flowers, talked about recipes, neighbors, elections. And I smiled, agreed, as if I'd really come back, as if I was one of them. But inside me, Tent 5 still shook in the wind. The sound of helicopter blades still visited when the fan spun, and every time the phone rang and no one spoke on the other end, I heard a voice say, "Miss Maddox, he didn't make it." Those voices don't stop just because you come home. They shift. The kitchen radio repeated news like triage whispers. Crisis, conflict, new deployments. The war didn't end when the plane landed. It just changed names. And now, it was silence. Silence in every question they didn't ask. Silence when someone spoke of the bravery of our troops, without knowing that bravery is often just fear wearing a mask. Silence when I saw a sign that read, "Reserved parking for veterans," and no one recognized me as one. I've never felt so invisible. There were no medals, no parade, no letter, just a small paycheck with a round number, as if my soul had been reduced to hours worked. That's when I developed a habit of cleaning everything. Windows, silverware, every corner of the house. Like if the space around me stayed in order, maybe the chaos inside me would quiet down. But the journal never left the nightstand. It was my last companion from the war. The only one who spoke the same language. Now and then I'd open it just to touch the pages, like checking if a wound still lingers, like praying, or saying goodbye. I've never told anyone. Not even when they asked if I dreamed of the past. "No," I'd say. "I sleep fine." That was a lie. Most nights I'd wake up with a dry throat and damp eyes. Sometimes I'd just sit in the dark, listening to the neighborhood. Sounds, trying to remind myself time had moved on, trying to believe I was safe now. But I wasn't, because coming back isn't the same as returning. Coming back is being here, and no longer fitting. It's wearing clothes that don't warm you anymore, eating from plates that don't nourish you, watching the world move on like all the heroes died, and those who returned were just a painful reminder of something no one wants to hear about. Now, at 90, they still call me an example of resilience. And every time they say that, I smile. But only I know that part of me is still lying in that tent, with dirty hands, a stained coat, and a head full of names no one wants to remember. Because yes, I came back, but I never came back whole. And maybe that's all I have left to confess now, before I tell you about the place I live in today. a room where everything is clean. But nothing is new. I live in a small room. 4 white walls, a window that creaks when the wind blows, and a wardrobe that holds every piece of clothing I chose to keep, which isn't much. The blouses are still buttoned, the skirts still pressed. The blue scarf I wore in triage now rests folded in my sock drawer, like a forgotten flag from a war no one talks about anymore. At first glance, everything here looks clean, tidy, safe. But only those who've survived long silences know. Not all cleanliness is peace. Sometimes it's just absence. Absence of voices. Absence of fresh memories. Absence of possible futures. Every now and then, I still hear helicopters. Even with the windows shut. Even with the sleeping pills. The sound comes. I don't know if it's memory, hallucination, or just a part of me that never wanted to stop hearing. It's not loud. More like a hum that dances along the walls, touches the ceiling, and settles in my chest. When it comes, I close my eyes, and I'm back in Tent 5. I see the stretchers, the stacked charts, and my hands, so young, so stained with haste and guilt. Time doesn't move here. It folds. It loops. Every day at 9 a.m., they serve tea. At 11:30, lunch. At 3 p.m., the same instrumental music plays. They say it's calming. But the repetition... Oh, the repetition is what drains me most. That's why I keep the journal by my bed. I open a different page each day, run my fingers over the faded words like reading pain in Braille. Pain I no longer know how to speak aloud. Sometimes I say a name under my breath and wait for the echo to answer. For some current in the air to whisper, I remember you too. But the echo never replies. The other residents call me Miss Ellie. They think I'm quiet, polite, that I have good manners. They don't know that at night I talk to names written 60 years ago. They don't know every object in my room is a marker, a symbol of a past no one else wants to hear about. The lamp on my dresser, no bulb, no use, is the same one we had in the wound care tent. I kept it like a relic. Sometimes I wipe it clean like tending an altar, the yellow scarf on my favorite chair. It belonged to a young man who asked me to wipe his face before he slept. He never woke up. I kept it, never washed it. The small wooden cross by my mirror, it was carved by a Filipina nurse who shared 3 weeks of triage with me before being transferred. She used to say writing was dangerous, but praying was safe. Now I do both. I pray by writing. This room is small, but it holds worlds. It holds a canvas tent in the rain. It holds the muffled buzz of radios. It holds the smell of ether that's followed me since that hospital waiting room. The same smell that made me open the journal again. Because that's what this room is deep down. The last tent. The tent where all the faces come back to visit me. The tent where I no longer stamp fates, but I still collect names. Just today, before writing this page, I found a folded piece of paper among my old clothes. It was tucked inside the sleeve of an old coat. A note from a soldier I was never able to identify, written in a shaky hand. If I don't make it back, tell her I have no regrets. I never knew who she was. But today I wonder if it's me. If it's all of us, women of war, who heard promises, secrets, vows of love, and then carried them in silence, like living safes, like walking archives of stories no one asked us to remember. But I remembered, and I still remember. And that's why I write, because this room may have no surprises, but inside it, there is memory. There's an entire battlefield suspended in time. There are invisible wounds and letters never sent. There's the muffled sound of a war that didn't end with treaties. And now that I've told you how I live, I need to tell you what I carry in my chest. A cross and a choice. A doubt that never left me. I've worn this cross for so long, I can't even remember the day I first put it on. It doesn't shine anymore. The chain lost its golden hue and turned a dull, almost gray tone. But it still rests against my chest like a whispered reminder, not of blind faith, but of everything I witnessed while trying to believe. It was never a church cross. It was a gift from a Vietnamese patient who survived a bombing, and though she didn't speak English, handed me the object wrapped in a piece of dirty cloth. She pointed to her heart, then to me. I understood. I kept it. I never took it off. I've carried it ever since. And with it, I carry the doubt. Because during all those years of war, I learned that doing the right thing didn't always mean following orders. That justice sometimes meant disobeying, quietly. That saving someone could mean lying on paper. That doing nothing was still a choice. And that every choice, in that place, cost a piece of your soul. I remember one heavy night when they called me to the field shelter. A group of soldiers had been hit in an ambush. They were all in shock. One of them grabbed my arm and said, "Don't let me fall asleep. If I sleep, I won't come back." The protocol was clear. Sedate. That's what calmed them, what kept panic at bay. But I hesitated. I stayed beside him, held his hand, counted the seconds. And even with his eyes shutting, he kept repeating, "Stay. Please, stay." I didn't sedate him. I stayed, and he survived. Years later, I received a letter from an address I didn't recognize. Inside, there was a photo of a smiling family. On the back, it read, "Thank you for not letting me disappear." I cried for hours, because there it was. A life that was never in the files. A life that existed because of a choice that defied every rule. Today, with the cross still resting on my chest, I ask myself, who would I have been if I had followed every single instruction? If I'd never faked a chart? If I'd never held a hand past my shift? Maybe I'd feel lighter. Maybe I'd sleep better. Maybe my record would be spotless, but I would be less human. Obedience makes us functional, but it's doubt that makes us just. I wrote that in my journal a week after the war ended. I hadn't read it again until now, because now, at 90, with a body that's tired and a memory sharp in strange places, I understand that my cross was never just a symbol of faith. It's a mark of everything only God saw, of the choices no one witnessed, of the whispers I kept, of the promises no one else heard. And now, when I touch this cross, I no longer ask whether I did right or wrong. I ask if I was true, true to the voice deep inside me. The one that begged me to do more than the system allowed. To listen, to see, to feel. And I know I was. That's why I keep writing. Because it's all I can do now. To keep confessing. To keep telling. Because maybe, just maybe, someone out there will hear me. Someone will understand that, behind the crisp uniform and the faded cross, there was a woman who wanted to do what was right, even if it meant disobeying the world. And before I end, I need to tell you about the deepest silence of all. The silence of a life spent being called strong, without ever truly being heard. For many years, they called me strong. They said it with admiration, disguised as kindness. Miss Eleanor is made of steel, never complains, always upright, always steady. And I smiled, because it was easier to look like a statue than to explain the shrapnel I still carried inside. No one ever asked what I saw when I closed my eyes. Not even the ones who said they loved me. Not even the ones who sat at my table, broke bread with me on patriotic holidays. It was as if my pain had an expiration date, as if time had turned me into nothing more than an elegant old lady who folds blankets just right and never forgets a birthday. But I remember every single one I failed to save, and that doesn't age. They called me exemplary, national pride, a symbol of female resilience. They gave me plaques, certificates, even invited me to a veterans event. I sat in the third row, clapped through the speeches, but no one asked me to speak, because listening is harder than honoring what I carried inside my chest. Didn't fit into any ceremony. No one knew that every time someone thanked me for my care. Here in the home where I now live, I thought about the ones who died waiting, the ones who looked at me, in line, wide-eyed, and heard nothing but silence in return. Sometimes when they call me sweet, I almost laugh. They don't know. They don't know that some nights, I get up and walk slowly to the window just to whisper names. They don't know there are letters I never sent, with apologies that have no destination, that I wrote entire speeches no one heard, except the walls and the cross resting on my chest. I never wanted pity, but I would have given anything. To be heard, to have someone say, "You can talk, I'm here." It never happened, and maybe that's why I started writing these pages today. Not for vanity, not for redemption, but because someone needs to know. They existed. Every name written in that journal had a face. Every face had a fear. And I was the last person to look into many of those eyes. And I said nothing. That's why I write now. That's why this story is long, sometimes repetitive, sometimes too heavy to bear. Because everything I kept quiet for 60 years now pours out like released water, flooding everything. If someone listens to me now, not as a hero, not as a role model, but as a woman, maybe that's enough. Maybe that will return a piece of what was taken without a word. And if no one listens, well, at least I said it, at least I wrote it, and tomorrow, no, today, still today, today I opened the journal. Today I smelled the ether. Today I let it all come back. And now I need to tell you what happened when it all broke open again. When the morning came, and I realized I would never be able to stay silent again. This morning the sunlight slipped through the blinds with a gentleness that nearly moved me. It was early. The room was still silent. The hallways hadn't yet awakened, and the usual sounds, walker wheels, clinking cutlery, nurses' radios, still slept. And in that suspended silence, the smell returned. It wasn't strong, it wasn't harsh. It was like a ghost, ether, dry, clean, sterile. That scent that carries memories of stretchers, gauze, and whispers that never became screams. A smell I hadn't felt so clearly since the war. And in the instant the air passed through me, I knew there was no going back. My fingers moved on their own, reaching for the leather suitcase at the foot of the bed. It was still there, unmoved for decades, but pulsing. It felt like the suitcase was breathing, like it had been waiting for this day. I unzipped it slowly, feeling my joints creak, but also feeling something deeper open with it. Courage. Inside, still intact. The journal. I lifted it with both hands. The leather was dry, the edges of the pages yellowed, but the weight was the same. The weight of a life untold, of hundreds of names and promises never kept. I sat on the edge of the bed, back straight like I was in Tent 5 again, and opened to the first page. There it was. My name. Eleanor Ruth Maddox. And just below it, the first confession. Today, I let a man die in silence. And I smiled, handing in the chart, because I had to look alive. I read it quietly. This time, I didn't cry. I just took a deep breath. Once, twice, 3 times. Then I kept going. I read more names. I read symbols only I understood. I saw again the faces that never left me. I felt the stifling heat of canvas above my head. Heard voices asking for help. Saw hands gripping mine as their last gesture of faith. And then I realized the triage nurse, the one who stamped fates, who wrote in secret, who slept with her coat like armor. She was still here. Not buried, not forgotten, but alive, speaking, slowly, but fully. Today, for the first time, I left the journal, open, placed it on the table beside my cup of tea, like an invitation to a conversation. If someone walks in now, they'll see it. They'll see the pages. They'll see the past laid bare. And maybe they'll be startled. Or maybe they'll sit beside me and ask, "Do you want to tell me?" And if they do, I'll say yes, because today, I'm no longer afraid of my own voice. Because today, everything came back, but it came back differently. Not as trauma, but as testimony. And before the day ends, before someone knocks on the door, or the radio starts playing that soulless tune, I need to write one more page. The final one. Not an ending, but a passing, a release, a memory. Because if someone listens to me now, let it be with an open heart. No rush, no judgment. Like someone listening to a real story. A nurse's story, who only wanted the names she wrote, not to disappear with her. And now that everything is written, there's only one thing left. Close the journal. No, leave it open, and breathe. Because the next line, I haven't written it yet, but it's coming. Now everything is silent, not the hollow kind, but the kind that comes after the storm, when even the ghosts seem tired. The suitcase still sits in the corner of the room, open. The journal rests on the table, a page folded as if asking not to be forgotten, and I'm sitting here with my coat on my lap, folded, clean, like a flag that was never raised. Light filters slowly through the curtain, touches my face, my hands. The scarf I used so many times to hold back the sweat and the loneliness. Everything here breathes memory. Everything here looks back at me, even without eyes. Today I don't write out of anger or regret. I write because I don't want to die quiet. I've spent decades being told, it's not the time. It's better to let it go. That's just how it was for everyone. But no one stamped the way I stamped. No one held the promises I held, and then couldn't deliver. No one told me what to do with all of it after the war ended, and the world pretended nothing had happened. My confession isn't an accusation. It's not revenge. It's not a performance. It's just a gesture. A gentle warning that I existed. Oh, and that they did too. The ones who died looking at me. The ones who called my hand home. The ones who whispered, "Just write my name, that's all." And I did. Even when they told me to stop. Even when they said it was dangerous or useless or something for overly sensitive women. I wrote. Because someone had to remember. Because if not me, maybe no one would know that those forgotten heroes had names, stories, fears, letters hidden in their pockets. I still know each one. If you gave me time, I could recite half with my eyes closed, with the same care someone uses to pray, because for me, remembering became a form of prayer. Today, my body doesn't obey like it used to. My knees buckle, my hands burn, my vision fades. But my heart, oh, my heart still pulses like it did in Tent 5. Still jumps at young voices, still freezes when someone waits too long in the cafeteria line. And that's why, before time takes me, I want to leave this here. There's no such thing as a small story, no pain that doesn't deserve to be heard, and no silence that doesn't deserve, someday, to become a voice. Today the journal is on the table, the cross still on my chest. The yellow scarf rests on my shoulders like an old embrace. And if someone hears me now, let them listen gently, with an open heart, like someone reading a letter written by hand, with faded ink, but a whole soul, because I'm still here. And so are they, in the names I wrote, in the pages I never closed, in the memory that, finally, someone listened to. Now that everything's been said, I can breathe differently. You know, time doesn't heal the way they say. It just teaches us to store things better, to fold pain into the deeper corners of the soul, like old clothes packed away in a suitcase no one ever opens. But today I opened mine, and you were the one who listened. For so many years I thought my memories didn't matter, that my secrets were meant to die with me. But now I understand. It wasn't secrecy I was carrying. It was love. It was fear. It was humanity trying to survive in silence. Today I live slowly, sip my tea by the window, still write when my fingers allow, and sometimes I smile at the afternoon shadows, as if the faces came back just to keep me company. I don't have many people around, but I have peace and an open journal on my table. That's enough. If you've made it this far, thank you for staying, for not looking away, for being the one who finally listened with your heart. And if you can, share this with someone who's still holding their story, too quietly, with someone who still writes, not knowing if they'll be read. Because maybe deep down, we're all just letters waiting for someone to read us with tenderness. If you want to stay with me, subscribe to the channel, leave a sign, even a small one, and above all, take good care of the memories that live inside you. They're more alive than they seem, and some only need to be heard once to never be lost again.